about history. In my case, my personal history is that I am a black man. I am the son of an immigrant from Iran. I'm openly gay. I'm a lot of things. I'm a rabbi. I'm an educator. I'm a former educational administrator, a former environmental attorney, a member of the Youngstown, Ohio Board of Education, which makes me, at present, the only elected Green office holder in the state of Ohio. And I'm sure you have that energy also for my expressed thought that changes very soon. I hope there's a whole slew of elected Greens in Ohio and Indiana and elsewhere, and that's what we're going to work together and make happen, folks. Now, years ago, I was just a black kid in the projects in Newark, New Jersey. And later, in a dilapidated neighborhood in Jersey City, New Jersey, wondering why my daddy had to work so hard but never seemed to get ahead. Wondering why people followed me around in stores like I was a wanted criminal, afraid that I would steal things because of the color of my skin. Wondering why if people said education was so important, they wanted to rub my face in the dirt for the things I knew and for the limits I refused to accept. I saw struggle all around me. And despite all that, what I also saw was a ticket out, and that was education. And so I kept my head in a book. I studied, I worked my way out of tough circumstances into what people consider a prestigious Ivy League school, Princeton, and then through 3 law degrees. And through it all, that sense of education being a ticket out, the means for upliftment is something that carried me through and is very much what informs what I do in terms of my political activism and engagement. My personal goal and passion is to try to provide for the upliftment of all, whatever their circumstances, through education, educational advancement. I've seen a lot of things in my relatively short life. I've seen great adversity in this country. I've seen adversity in other countries. I lived for a time in Israel, in Haifa, to be specific, where I practiced as an environmental attorney. And I experienced racism there, a very unique kind. But of course, racism was not something that was unfamiliar to me as an American. And we'll talk about that story, that history in a bit more detail as we go along. But after living in various parts of the world and this great country, I found myself in a town called Youngstown, Ohio, a place that you may have heard of, name-checked frequently in State of the Union speeches and various political speeches. This place seen as a bellwether for America's economic decline. It's a city that's been halved in population by the slump since the 70s, decline in the steel industry. And I found myself in this town being suddenly a tax-paying homeowner for the first time in my life, the American dream, as they call it, air quotes. As this new resident of Youngstown, I looked around me and I saw a lot of what I was familiar with as a kid. I saw the racial disparity, I saw the lack of hope, I saw children languishing in an educational system that wasn't giving them any sense of upliftment and possibility of achievement. I saw blight, crime, despair. And I decided I wanted to be a part of changing that. And so my first foray into politics of any kind was to run for city council. Now, so those of you who know a little bit about my background, like a lot of African Americans, my family background was with the Democratic Party. We were one of many people who were just expected by rote to check next to the D on the ballot. And my story illustrates how toxic really that ultimately becomes. Because when I decided to run for council, Some people in this one-party town, Democrat town, sort of look at me and say, well, he seems interesting. He's got an educated background. He presents well. Let's talk to him and see. Let's talk to him and see how we can maybe work together. And while togetherness is something, and unity is something I value, their work together meant something very different. After sizing me up and down, the powers that be said, he's an environmental attorney. I bet you he's anti-fracking. So these are the causes that the corporatist parties work together on, unify for, engaging in the corporatist, toxic abuses, including environmental abuses, that unfortunately prevail in our country. And when it was clear to them that I wasn't on board with that, because I looked around me and saw the fracking cause as something that was abusive to the people I knew and loved, the neighbors that I shared this air, soil, and water with. When they saw that that was the case, that I wasn't on board with that, they very quickly tossed away any idea of working with me. That race I did abysmally in. And I think perhaps another sort of personality would have looked at that turnout and said, well, you know what, I tried. I tried to fight City Hall, and it didn't work. Maybe I'm just going to shuffle off and do something else. Less than 6 months later, I found myself running in a citywide race for school board in Youngstown as a write-in candidate. Now think about this for a moment. Think about this for a moment. Think about the perspective you have to come from to say, after basically failing pretty badly in one race, just a few months later, saying you're going to run in a race with a larger population, a larger electorate, and try to prevail as a write-in candidate. Well, they laughed. They laughed hard. They laughed so hard that their belly laughs kept them from seeing me walking all over the city, putting signs on every corner, shaking hands with people, talking to people who drove past, and honked because they appreciated the struggle. They appreciated the hustle, and they saw the sweat that went into advocating for them. Those people were the people that turned out and wrote my name in. The highest write-in total that we had in Youngstown electoral history. And that was because I believed in the cause that I was fighting for. It didn't matter who was against me. What mattered was what I and the people that I was representing were for. That's what it's about, folks. And fast forward a little bit to my more recent activism, because I feel like the history, the background informs where you're going, what is the trajectory, what is the point of this race that I'm engaged in as a presidential candidate? Well, not too long ago, after I started this campaign to make America green again, as some say, make America fair again. One of those issues of fairness had to do with our engagement as a country in causes that bring the toxicity of this country's warmongering and hyper-capitalist nature to other shores. And that's what's happening in Israel, Palestine. I was asked by a reporter from Cleveland.com, what about Israel? You're Jewish, you're a rabbi. I was serving the congregation as a rabbi in Youngstown, Ohio at the time. What about Israel? And I spoke my heart. I spoke my green values as a leader in the community, as a person engaged in human rights. And that was, we need to stop funding and aiding and abetting human rights abusers, whether Israel or Saudi Arabia or any country. And for that, I lost my job. And for that, I gained one of the things I'm most proud of in my yet young life. Because at the end of the day, you may support any number of things, any number of causes. But when you stand up and support something that is in favor, that is advocating for the lives and the rights of other human beings, people who are being murdered on the other side of the world, when you do that, when everyone else is standing against you and telling you you are wrong, but you know what side is right, that is when you make a difference. That is when you make a change. You change the energy in the air, and that's what we did. The articles that were written about that, the press coverage, which became international, opened up a conversation in the Jewish community, but outside the Jewish community, about the causes we support and the harm they bring to other people on the other side of the world. And that's a universally human, but a very green issue. Understanding that everything that we do is connected to everyone else, environmentally, but also societally, also in terms of justice. That's the approach that our party takes, the values that we believe in, and that's what I believe in. That's what my campaign believes in. So I want to talk about how we translate that into our platform as a campaign. A lot has been said about the Green New Deal. And our campaign supports that. We believe strongly in this wonderful opportunity it presents to protect our environment, to provide for an economic stimulation through 20 million green jobs in various sectors, to make clear our commitment to 100% renewable energy so that we make sure in the very limited time that we have that we stop this horrible climate change that we're experiencing that's ultimately going to be our undoing. I believe in that strongly, and I believe that we have to make clear distinctions because you have people in the Democratic Party who claim that they're carrying the mantle of the Green New Deal, and what they're offering is a faux socialist veneer layered on top of a hyper-capitalist, still very abusive system. You have alternative plans from Democrats like Cuomo that say 100% renewable energy for electricity. Well, what about all of the waste being belched into the air from transportation? A massive, massive portion of the carbon output. We as a party have to make sure that we stand up and let people know what the real deal is so that they aren't fooled and distracted from the task at hand with which we have so little time to deal with. But I want to talk to you about having a broad-based and comprehensive platform for change in this country because there are some in our party who want to focus solely, it seems, on the Green New Deal. They want to raise the banner solely as a champion on that issue. And while it's important, it is. Our country is suffering in so many different ways, and I know this very acutely as someone from Youngstown, Ohio, because when you're talking to a single mother, for instance, who has 3 children in a public educational system in Youngstown, Ohio, who's struggling at a job she's underpaid at, struggling to keep the lights on for those children, struggling because those children don't even have textbooks to take home for her to help them with their homework. Struggling to understand why that's the case and why that's allowed to be the case. The first thing I'm going to say to that parent is not necessarily going to be about the Green New Deal. I'm going to tell her about how we as a country need to have many new deals because so many parts of our society have been abused by this hyper-capitalist system. We need, as our campaign is calling it, a people of color Bill of Rights, a new deal for people who've been given a raw deal in this country for so many centuries. We need to address these issues being directed towards America's racial and ethnic minorities, and we need to call them out for what they are. Our People of Color Bill of Rights will deal with access to justice because as someone who has worked in the legal profession, I understand how people of color have been cheated out of equal access in this country. You have an overworked public defender system with people who may not have the qualifications to do that job to start with, but if they do, are so overloaded with cases, they're looking at cases for no more than 30 seconds. And they're saying to a young black male, for example, I know you say you didn't do it, but just take the plea deal. 20 years in an adult prison. Just take the plea so that I can move on to the next case. It's happening all over this country, and it is feeding the school to prison pipeline where people of color are being sent. They are being sent from purposefully failing schools where children are being monetized for profit there into a prison system where they are once again being monetized for profit by private prison companies and being worked for labor at amounts that equates to slavery. Slavery all over again. Mass incarceration is the new plantation system, and it has to end. I mentioned education. We have an equal right to education in this country, and unfortunately it hasn't been recognized. We have failing districts all over this country, and the answer to that has been to monetize our children through toxic state takeovers like they are doing in Youngstown, Ohio. I'm fighting it there, and I will fight it all across this country. No to taking away local control. No to privatization. No to monetizing our children's suffering. We have to fight the sovereignty of our native peoples in this country from whom so much has been stolen, and yet more continues to be taken away from them. We have to recognize the sacredness of their lands. We have to recognize their rights and their sovereignty. We must fight for freedom from healthcare racism and environmental racism. The feeling that in communities that are majority minority, that it is okay for there to be a dearth of healthcare options, that it is okay to pollute those parts of our country because no one cares about that corner of our country. We care, and we can care because we are fighting for everyone's rights as a party, but we also can care because we aren't being bankrolled by the people who are monetizing people's suffering. Freedom from colonialism, and I'm going to break down what that means, because colonialism takes so many forms. It takes the form of what this country is doing to the people in Puerto Rico. Now, some candidates in this race think that what's going to solve what's happening there is, once again, the Green New Deal. Much respect I have for that, but you aren't going to be able to solve the problems of colonialism to the end colonialism. You must end colonialism in all its forms that we have engaged in and bought into in this country. And that also includes the various forms of mental colonialism that have been underway in this country for centuries, where minorities have been unfortunately been tricked into a system that serves them no benefit. I mentioned my family checking the D next to candidates' names for generation and generation on end. We are so important as a force in this country because when we break that, we will help break free that colonialist mentality, that monetization of people's suffering by giving them a choice. Freedom from predatory banking and lending. So much about the banking industry and the lending industry in this country has been stacked against people of color, against minorities. It must end. And this is something that's very salient in the time and place that we're in right now as a country. Fair opportunity for immigration, for refugee status, for citizenship. Right now we have a fascist regime in this country that is gearing up to engage in raids against Latinx people who have come here for shelter from the suffering they're experiencing elsewhere, suffering occasioned and created in many ways by our hyper-capitalist interventionist policies in their countries. They are coming here because of what we've done to their people, and they are being abused by us as a country. They are being put into concentration camps. I'm going to say it again because people seem confused about whether that's the appropriate term. It is. They are concentration camps at our border. How can anybody be okay with that? Anyone who sits by and is silent in that is complicit in the deaths that are happening in our border, the abuses that are happening in our border. I will not be silent. I hope that you will not be silent. In addition to these issues which affect people of color, but really affect all of us, because when any portion of our society is affected, any portion is abused, we all lose. We lose out on this unified sense of brotherhood and sisterhood that we need to have as a country to truly progress. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention workers' rights. I talked about my father who worked so hard, never seemed to get ahead, came to this country, was a dishwasher, and worked his way up to a bus driver. And when I was a teenager, that was really something, because finally we had insurance.
Yes.
For many years as a kid, we all just crossed our fingers and hoped nobody got hurt. If you fall off your bike, don't fall too hard, because we had no money to go to a doctor. We finally had insurance. He had a government job working for New Jersey Transit. He was a member of a union. It was something to be proud of. Everyone should have a chance to experience that pride. Everyone should be paid in a way that allows them to have pride in being able to pay their bills. Everyone should have health care, universal single-payer health care. It shouldn't be something you have to wait for. And everyone should have the opportunity to be a part of a strong and empowered union in this country. One that is at the forefront of fighting for a living wage. Because we do not have a living wage in this country. So many people working so hard, the working poor. You hear that phrase, and it applies to my family, but it should not exist anywhere. No one should be working and still poor. I mentioned our prison system. We've got to end private prisons, period. No one should profit off of anyone suffering in incarceration. No one should have a motive to feed people through the incarceration system. We've got to end policing abuses in this country. Law enforcement killing people on our streets because of their race. This is genocidal, and it must end. We've got to end our interventionist activities abroad, folks. This country should be, and often positions itself as a beacon of democracy abroad. But what we are exporting is death. You have drones raining death upon other corners of the world. And the callous indifference to this from our corporatist, capitalist government is something that is characteristic not of democracy, but of fascism. It has to end. We must close the bases abroad. Close them all. Unless they are peacekeeping bases with the consent of that country and the UN, there's no reason for us to be occupying any bases anywhere else in the world. The militarism must end, and we must cut our war budget and change our priorities. Change our priorities to real defense. Our defense budget, air quotes, is really a war budget. Money used to foment war abroad. Real defense is a well-educated and empowered citizenry. Invest in our children. Invest in our children. Invest in education. Invest in the future. Human infrastructure. This is how we truly progress as a country. So you've heard my story, my background, my platform. And I promised you earlier that I was going to talk to you about history, because history is so informative. History helps put the why to what we do. So I want to tell you a story rooted in history, in fact. We sit here, or stand here as the case may be, at this place in time, on July 13th, on what the Tennessee governor has named Nathan Bedford Forrest Day, after a KKK leader. Same day is also named in Austin, Texas, Sandra Bland Day. Now, if you don't know who Sandra Bland is, she is a woman who was, unfortunately, by the racism of law enforcement, subjected to a callous death that no one should have to experience, that no one's loved one should have to hear about in a Texas jail. Her crime? Being black, like so many others in this country. And I'm so proud that Austin recognized that and recognized the fact that her name needs to be said, as the movement says, hashtag say her name. She was a person who was killed callously by racist law enforcement abuse. Say her name, say all of their names. And behind their names is a history. Here in Indiana, a place that the actor Adam Driver, one of the actors in the film, Black KK Klansman, said he as a child saw KKK rallies in regularly. Here in Indiana, in response to the great migration of black folk from the South to this state for jobs, this state saw a rise in KKK activity and restrictive racial housing covenants. There's so many people that want to tell you, well, that was then, that was so long ago. But all of that funnels down into what you experience here and now in this day and age. A name, one name in particular, looms very large over Muncie, Indiana, and that is the name Ball.
Yes.
Ball State University, after all. Written into Muncie's Westwood Neighborhood Association document signed by an E.B. Ball is the following phrase: the ownership and occupancy of lots and buildings in this edition are forever restricted to members of the pure white race. That name on signage all over this city, recognized and renowned with pride by so many people. That's what that name represented. And so many people looking into the racial background and history of this area often seem to be at a loss for facts and words when it comes to white industrialists like the Ball family. The city of Muncie itself, after all those years of restrictive racial covenants, is still, as some have said, persistently segregated. Widely in industry are the two African-American majority neighborhoods in Muncie. According to the 2010 census numbers, they're about 25% white, but the rest of Muncie outside those neighborhoods is 88% white. The redlining, begun in that era, lives on. How can you say it is just history when people today are living with it, suffering through it, struggling with it? We have never, in all those years, truly addressed it. And people in the city we are in are feeling the impact today. There's a song that some of you may know, I hope all of you know, Strange Fruit. It was a sad and mournful song, sung so beautifully but painfully by Billie Holiday. The song says, "Southern trees bear a strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root. Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees." It begins with the line, "Southern trees." But the inspiration for that song was a lynching of two black teenagers in Marion, Indiana, not far from here.
Yep.
As I said before, say her name, say their name. J. Thomas Shipp and Abraham S. Smith. They were two young black men, and they were murdered in a spectacle lynching, August 7th, 1930, in Marion, Indiana. And there's a connection with nearby Muncie. Because you see, there's a story, a further story beyond the fact that after being accused, without any trial or due process, after being accused and then murderously lynched, there was an issue with the bodies. They were left to hang overnight and were cut down in the morning. And news reached the Reverend J.E. Johnson, a pastor and mortician here in Muncie, Indiana. Knowing the Marion had no black undertakers, he engaged in a brave trip to Marion to pick up their bodies and prepare them for a Christian religious burial. Rumors spread that a white mob was coming to take those bodies back. Muncie's black community prepared themselves, and the town's white sheriff, Fred Puckett, stood with them. Puckett and a posse from the black community in Muncie escorted Johnson to the county line, from where he continued to marry, and he delivered them for burial. An example of white and black standing together. That is how we're going to heal the problems in this country. And that is a word that needs to be used here, because all the things that I've mentioned, the political issues I've mentioned, they sound static on a piece of paper. They sound static as a platform for a campaign. But behind them are people who are hurting, people who wear scars that are not visible to you, but are there. We will heal them through true togetherness. Not getting together, as some in my hometown have done, to deprive people, but getting together to put our arms around people, to recognize our common humanity. This country is segregated. It is segregated in so many ways, along racial lines, socioeconomic lines, the haves, the have-nots, the black, the white, the Latinx, the straight, the gay. The lines are clear and felt by social, racial, and sexual minorities all across this country. As Maya Angelou put it, we are more alike, my friends, than we are unlike. We must break down the walls that divide us, and that is what I am here to do. That is why I am in this campaign. I am here to break down the solitudes, to bring a voice in the midst of deafening silence, to bring people's struggle, individual and collective, into national consciousness, awareness, and action. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, as a part of mentioning how we're going to do that, because there are words, there's prayerfulness, there's intention, but there's also very real struggle for us as a party. We have some real stark issues to deal with, and some of those issues, let's be real, folks, are amongst ourselves. I said that this country is segregated. It'd be remarkable, although I wish it were the case, if we weren't affected by that also as a party. My experience as a candidate is that I am experiencing a primary in this presidential race that is also segregated. I have been fighting for the rights of all, whatever your color, whatever your background, all Americans, all human beings. But I have found that in addition to that fight, I also find myself having to fight people who say they support that fight, even in my own party, just to be heard. I have been fighting all across the country just for equal access. And so I thank you for allowing me to have this platform. And I thank you for also allowing Sister Senator to have this platform. And any candidate who wants to be a part of the conversation on this platform uses to make this conversation stronger, and rather than, as some candidates feel, rather than feeling threatened in any way by your presence makes me, makes us, makes all of us stronger, and that's what we have to be about. I have dealt with state parties across this country who have given a certain candidate preferential status, preferential speaking place, and, well, you know what? Say her name, say his name. I have used that for the likes of Sandra Bland. I've used that for the two men who were lynched. I'm not going to put that on that person's level. I hear you. So, that exclusion that I've experienced, going to state parties that have said, we're going to let this particular candidate speak, but no, you are not allowed to speak as a part of our convention. I don't mean that person getting a minute more, or 5 minutes more, or more preferential time. I mean, that person will speak and you can't speak. What they didn't understand, and I hope that you understand, is that I am an openly gay black man. I have gone through every struggle imaginable. I have gone from being a member of a working poor family, working my way to the Ivy League. You can't close those doors on me. I will kick them open because I am a Green, because what I'm fighting for is for the rights of all, because I have something to say that matters, and you are not going to silence those voices. And so when I've done at those state conventions, I have gone, and whenever there is a break, politely and respectfully, I have gotten up with a bullhorn that is my ghetto Jersey mouth, and I have announced that I will be speaking.
Speak.
Now I know that I don't have to do that here, but the person who's going to do that in 2020, who's going to represent this party, has to be a person who's going to bust down doors, because you're going to get so much exclusion from the Democrats, from the Republicans, from people who don't want the body politic in this country to hear from another voice. And so, because I understand how the struggle has made me stronger as a human being, in some ways I thank that candidate for giving me the practice I'm going to use when I win and take on the Democrats and the Republicans. There are so many people who've been using this sense of faux progressivism, like Bernie Sanders, who marched in the 60s, but when asked on the Breakfast Club about reparations, had a hard no to say, while he also talked about how, yeah, I'm a millionaire now. I wrote a book. You can too. Doesn't sound very socialist, does it?
No.
I am an eco-socialist. I know some of the people in this race have also used that term and use it rather vociferously, but let me tell you what that means. What it means is that you believe in a society where everyone is able to share in a part. There is no socialism without equality. There is no socialism without equal access. There's no socialism without the voices of the oppressed coming to the forefront. Those voices crying out like the voices of those two young men who never got justice in Marion, Indiana. It is an effort that is a responsibility on the part of all of us. By sharing in the wealth, so to speak, we share also in the responsibility. We all have a responsibility to go out and advocate for our fellow brothers and sisters, for their well-being environmentally, educationally, health and well-being. We have a responsibility, not just as Greens, but as human beings. And so, it is such a pleasure to be here with you, to take up that responsibility together, and I encourage you to go out energized from this meeting, from this state congress, to go do great things, as I know you're already doing in your local parties, in your local communities. Because together we are going to break this abusive system. Together we are going to change this country, and we are going to change the world.
Yes.
So I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for talking about Sandra Bland. I'm going to say something to you all. Obama made a comment when a young man, Trayvon Martin, was killed, and said that could be my son. And a lot of people were offended by that. But Sandra Bland was the same age as my daughter when she was killed. Yeah. And they both were in PhD programs at the same time. And when Sandra Bland, and their birthdays are in the same month, days apart. Oh, wow. So when she was murdered, I'm telling you, you brought tears to my eyes because I cried. And I still cry for that young lady today because I feel like that could have been my daughter. My daughter get pulled over quite a few times by the police. And they are pretty rough with young black women. You may not know that, but I know that, and I thank you for saying that.
I just want to add that Sandra Bland's story and your eloquent comments on that, brings to mind the fact that there are so many black women who are missing, who have been abused, who have been murdered all across this country, and their stories aren't being told. They aren't being told, and in many cases, they aren't being actively looked for.
Right.
So I just want to say that mentioning that on my part, I know mentioning that on your part is our way of saying, we see you.
Yes.
Yeah.
We see you and we hear you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we're going to have, I'm sorry, Adam, could you bring up that schedule one more time?
That looks
So we can